One framework that's made the biggest impact in my marketing career is the Jobs to be Done framework. On the surface level, it's a simple framework to understand. People hire products to help them accomplish a job in their life. For example, I'm hiring this can of pop right now to quench my thirst. Not sponsored by Coke. Understanding what your customers are hiring your product to do is a true power-up. It can help you educate people on how your product can help them better than your competitors. And that's exactly what Asia Oranjo, CEO of Demand Maven, did for one of her clients. With her team's help, they grew their revenue by 10 times in just 2 years.
But I would say research and Jobs to be Done is at the core of pretty much anything and everything that we do, even when we do paid acquisition, for example. But through this very big effort, we saw trials triple. We saw a 20% lift in activation rate overall. And I think my favorite stat in the first round was a 4x lift in growth. And, obviously, there was a lot that went into that.
In this Marketing Pops episode, you'll learn first how marketers can use the Jobs to be Done framework to help improve their marketing. Second, a real-world example of how Asia used the Jobs to be Done framework with one of her clients. Third, how to avoid chasing the shiny new marketing trend. And fourth, how to build more confidence as a marketer. Now, before we start, I've created a power-up cheat sheet that you can download, fill in, and apply Jobs to be Done to your marketing. Go to marketingpowerups.com to get it now, or find that link in the description and show notes. Are you ready? Let's go!
Marketing Power-Ups! Ready? Go! Here's your host, Rambly John!
One of the power-ups we're going to be talking about today, you really dig, is a Jobs to be Done framework. Can you share the story of how you came across this? What was the problem you were facing, and how did you come across this wonderful framework that I also love and I believe marketers should be using as a part for their marketing?
I had the very, unique experience. Maybe actually not that unique, but it feels unique, where I actually learned it from another really well-known marketer in the space, Claire Suellentrop, who, depending on the time of this recording, you will have had her co-founder, Gia Laudy, on the podcast as well. But Claire and I both lived in Atlanta. She has since moved into, I think now, Kansas City. I'm still in Atlanta, but I had the very wonderful pleasure of learning about Jobs to be Done actually through Claire. And seeing her work, especially her consulting practice and her marketing work, and seeing how she leveraged Jobs to be Done, it was just such a light bulb moment for me that I thought, oh my gosh, this is, one, really cool, and two, it's just so clear how effective it is when it comes to the work that we marketers do. So I learned it from another marketer, really. And then once I got introduced to it, I dove pretty much just all in. And I'm still learning things about Jobs to be Done even today, things I had no clue about, ironically enough, from other marketers. And then eventually a little bit from some of the champions of Jobs to be Done, like the early founders of it, like Bob Moesta. But yeah, that's how I got introduced to it.
Claire is awesome. I'm going to have her on the show as well. It's just to talk about her experience as well. It's cool that you came across this. For people who might not be familiar with this, Jobs to be Done is traditionally a product framework that helps product teams build better products. How has it helped you? How can it help marketers be better at marketing, be better essentially at their jobs with the Jobs to be Done framework?
Just to break down what Jobs to be Done is. So Jobs to be Done, it's an approach. It's an approach to thinking strategically. And what it basically says is customers are ultimately hiring products for a particular job. There is some progress in the world that they want to make, and they buy certain products and services to help them make that progress. When we apply that to product, usually it's in the context of what kind of product should we build, and how can we help, what are customers trying to achieve by hiring this product, and therefore, what should we build? How do we make it better? How do we help complete their job better? When we apply it to marketing, Jobs to be Done can take many, many different avenues, and the possibilities are truly endless. Everything from how can we make it really clear that the copy or the messaging that we're leveraging, it indicates to the customer that if you want to buy this product, it's going to help you accomplish your job. So we get into positioning messaging right there of what progress is the customer trying to make and how do we clearly communicate that. And then it also gets into even how should we structure our website? How should we think about structuring our onboarding emails, our activation experiences, and then all the way down to how do we make sure that this product really clearly stands out in the market? So we get into go-to-market activities. Of course, that includes things like positioning, but it also includes things like what are our talk tracks? What's our sales deck? How do we pitch? I mean, the opportunities truly are endless. And I know for us, we use jobs to be done in all of those contexts. But I think the key piece of this, though, is when you really understand what customers are actually trying to achieve with like buying the product, whatever it is. When you understand that, you can then reverse engineer all the things getting in the way for the customer of that. So now we get into customer journey mapping and understanding the full customer experience and all the little tiny things that get in the way of customers making that progress, in addition to all the things that propel them forward. And I know in our work, so much of our work on the Demand Maven consultancy side has to do with understanding clients' customers better than the client, and then understanding what are all the things that either propel a customer forward into buying versus pulling them away. And this is the secret sauce. Much easier said than done, but when you really understand that, you can get into the psychology of the buying process, and that's really powerful for marketers.
I love how you put it, that it's about understanding the journey and trying to understand what might be limiting and blocking people from making the purchase of that particular product. And often it's in the mindset. And you mentioned psychology. You've probably seen this multiple times over and over again. Like, what are some common like those blockers that you've seen? And it could be them confused because they don't understand exactly what the product is because the positioning is unclear. What are some common blockers that you've seen working with different types of businesses, yourself and with the team at your team at Demand Maven?
Oh my gosh. The list is truly endless. But if I had to start with a couple, I would say the top two most common blockers that we see for customers in terms of buying a product is you actually already said it. They really don't understand the value. And even more specifically, they don't understand the value in the context that they're in. And that's really what Jobs to be Done is all about. Jobs to be Done is all about what is the context upon which customers buy and make decisions and decide, okay, like I'm hiring this product for this specific job within this specific context. And this is so true for a lot of early stage SaaS companies and software companies, but a lot of the times they don't really fully understand the complete context of why a customer is buying or the process upon which they are going through buying. And therefore, they might have an inkling of what the job is, but they don't maybe understand like the full context. And so we see this on the website. Customers will come to the website, read through the homepage, get confused because they're like, okay, like this looks the same as like other competitors, or they really can't tell the difference. I'm going to give you an example. If you were to go pull up the top 5 most common project management platforms, right, so like Asana, Trello, ClickUp, they're all going to kind of read the same. Some of these actually might have, taken a page from the book of jobs and kind of, differentiated a little bit. But the homepage is, if you've got a customer that's comparing options, and if it all looks the same, reads the same, has the same words, they can't really tell. So then the question really then becomes, okay, the second part that I mentioned earlier, which is, okay, but like, if these are all relatively the same, like what's the exact context that I would buy this versus this? And this is kind of where we get into the positioning conundrum and also messaging. So what they do is they go and they click through features pages and they're trying to like figure it out. They might actually go to pricing, because sometimes pricing can actually tell a customer, indicate a customer, like how should I compare or how should I think about this solution in the context that I'm buying? And if you're comparing with spreadsheets, then it's really all about like, okay, how do I, like they're looking for anchor points. And the website is like the first offender, I would say, especially if it's not very well done. But this is like one of the very big areas that can be improved. The KPI to improve that, though, like usually it's website visit to trial or demo booking rate. And so if that KPI is relatively healthy, and I'm going to say relatively healthy as in like it's truly relative. Benchmarks are great, but they're also kind of dangerous. But the other area I would say is onboarding and activation. and just in such like the biggest way, because when a customer comes into a product and they have a very clear job, which 9 times out of 10 they do, and it is not clear to them how the product helps them accomplish that job, it's already not going to be a paying customer. Like they're already not going to actually become a customer because they're having to do a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of like mental work to try to figure out like what this is and what it does and how it helps them and like what they should do next. And onboarding is usually the next best opportunity that we find to improve those blockers. So whenever we work with a company, our first places that we check are, okay, does the website do its job? Is the positioning and also therefore the messaging, are those 2 things clear? And then the third thing we look at is, what does the sign up and onboarding activation experience look like? And then from there, I mean, we can get into more granular things. We can also expand it out into like retention, expansion revenue. Maybe a SaaS company is killing it and they're like, what are we missing? Like, what are we not doing? And finding new growth opportunities is where we kind of go into that work and we start looking at, okay, well, if everything is relatively like working well, what are some of the other opportunities that you might have missed? And we get into other details there of, is there expansion, revenue opportunities, retention, things like that. But I would say those are the first like 3 bases that we analyze and that we cover. And sometimes all 3 of those are jacked up and we got to like address all of them. And then sometimes it's maybe just like a couple of things, but there's more opportunity in other areas. And so that's kind of what our work is.
I totally agree. Onboarding activation, super important.
You've got a book on this.
I got a book on that. I didn't want to plug it. I don't want to feel weird about that, but thank you. Essentially, that I love how I totally agree with you. I like positioning messaging flows directly into onboarding activation. And if they don't get that right first, then none of that later down funnel stuff happens really well as well. I love that how you're also like taking a look at the whole funnel and not just like, let's get you signups. Are those signups converting, which is super cool. I love hearing this, that you're taking a look at that, you and your team. I want to talk a little bit about something you said earlier around that you and your team, your goal is to understand the client's customers better than the client themselves. I'm like, wow, that's really, it really tells a lot because, no founder would admit that, they know my customer better just because like maybe it's ego, maybe it's like, I'm the one who started this company here. But can you talk a little bit about that? Like how do you do that? You actually talk to customers for them, and you do surveys. Like what is your approach to quote unquote knowing the client's customers better than they do?
Okay, so this kind of breaks down into the different types of research, of qualitative research and then quantitative research. So yes, a core part of our project is to run customer interviews. It can also be audience interviews. Maybe they're not actually customers, but they fit the target market profile and they potentially could be customers, but they've never heard of your product or whatever it is. And then yes, we do also run surveys, both website surveys and also like actual just like conducted surveys to customer bases. And when it comes to the qualitative side, meaning understanding, the non-numbers piece, it really comes down to the types of questions that we're asking. So most founders we find, now I'm not going to say all of them, there are some founders who are like in the jobs to be done world and they get it and they're like, yep, I know exactly how to take this and apply it to the marketing perspective. And I would say that's a rare breed. And they're very awesome when we do find those people. But I would say most founders tend to ask questions that are purely related to the product. What kind of features do you like? What don't you like? What about the product can we change? They might understand the problems that they're experiencing or that the customer is experiencing around like what drove them to actually buy the product or at least search for a solution. But they might not be thinking about all of the other aspects of, well, what did you compare it to? Why did you choose this one? How long did it take you to make this decision? What was the process? So walk me through the full process. Like, when did you know that you had a problem? And then what were some of the things that you tried along the way? Why didn't those things work? And then why did you land on this? And this is where we get into competitive differentiators, positioning in the market. All of those questions really cover those aspects of how we think about really understanding the customer. But then there's the other side of it too, of what are some of the behaviors that they might have just from like a personal perspective of like, where do they hang out online when they want to find more, or when they want to learn more about their industry, where do they go? What are some of the places that they turn to whenever they need help? What's their preferred method of content like consumption? Are they listeners, readers, watchers? Like, what does their behavior look like outside of that? And those are the kinds of it's like somewhat anecdotal, but also just like purely experiential things. And then, then there's also the aspect of like, when it comes to onboarding, walk me through how you figured out how to use this product and just kind of like see like how they like walk through it. We get into a little bit of like UX research into this, but we also get into just like the pure qualitative side of the full customer journey. And then there's also like, tell me about your life. What's your life like? What's your job? Or, what do you do all day? And these are the kinds of questions I think most teams skip because they kind of feel like they don't need it, or they, or like it's prying, or they're not sure like how it connects the dots and how it tells a larger story. But a lot of the times, whenever we work with clients, and if the founder and also the team, if they're super duper engaged and they are like, as soon as we analyze an interview or we share like a recording, they're on it, like they're listening to it. A lot of the times they come back and they say, wow, like you asked questions we never would have thought to ask, but also we heard responses that we were not expecting. And there are also responses that they are expecting. So I would say most teams, generally speaking, most people have like a pretty like fundamental understanding of the customer, but there are some teams out there who don't at all. Like they literally never talk to a customer ever. And those are the teams that obviously we love to come in and help. And then for those who have a baseline understanding but want to get at something more, we're usually able to do the digging. That's the qualitative side. So the quantitative side gets into the analysis of every single interview. And we take it a step further by, once we conduct interviews, surveys, whatever it is, we actually aggregate all that data into a single database and we analyze it. And we do the analysis piece. One, because it's a step that I think most marketers and teams skip. They'll do the interviews, but sometimes they don't actually like take a step back and they say, okay, what's the overall trend, and make it as data driven as possible. And this is where a lot of teams can be led. They can be led astray because it feels like they heard a trend throughout the interviews, but when they actually map it out and analyze it, they find that there was actually something else. And so it's really tempting to do interviews and then to just be like, oh, okay, I know what the answers are. But then it's also equally tempting to, have all that data and to just like totally ignore it. And our job is to really take it through the full process of interviews, analysis, and then insight extraction. And then once we extract insights, we can take that and apply it to, any recommendations that we have around growth.
Before we continue, I want to thank those who made this video possible, 42 Agency. Now, when you're in scale-up mode and you have KPIs to hit, the pressure is on to deliver demos and signups. And it's a lot to handle: demand gen, email sequences, RevOps, and even more. That's where 42 Agency, founded by my good friend Camille Rexton, can help you. They're a strategic partner that's helped B2B SaaS companies like Profitwell, Teamworks, Sprout Social, and HubDoc build a predictable revenue engine. If you're looking for performance experts and creatives to solve your marketing problems at a fraction of the cost of in-house, look no further. Go to 42agency.com to talk to a strategist to learn how you can build a high-efficiency revenue engine now. You can find that link in the description below. Let's jump back in. And I love how all of that questions is really, you mentioned it earlier, about understanding the context that the buyer is trying to, what are the problems? What triggered them to start looking to make the purchase? So you're like, all those, it sounds like it's prying. But it really is about understanding the context. Like, what are they doing? What was the problem they face? What was happening, and all that stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I really love how you really went into the detail there. Can you share a case study here? I believe you have a case study that you walked through this whole process with one of your clients that actually has 10x their growth, which is amazing. And you and your team have been working with them for several years now. Can you share that story of this whole job to be done applied so people can hear the result of all of this beautiful and hard work as well?
I love a good growth story, especially when there's context applied. So the context for this story is we have been working with they're a vacation rental platform company. So they're a SaaS. I would say they're in the earlier stages. So we're just going to say that they're less than 10 million in ARR. And this vacation rental software company, it's what you would expect in terms of SaaS, so software as a service. There are vacation rental companies that need a platform to manage their listings, manage their prices, rates, channels, managing all the things. And at the time when we first started working with this company, vacation rental software company, they were already growing, but they hired us because they were like, we're kind of killing it. We want to keep killing it, like across all opportunities. And then so funny because right when we started working together, COVID hit, the pandemonium, panorama, whatever you want to call it. COVID hit. And when travel stopped, or at least dramatically slowed down, I think a lot of countries closed down around the world. When travel stopped, the vacation rental companies, my clients' customers, started freaking out because travel's not happening, which means that they've got to figure out how they're going to stay afloat because they're a vacation rental company. Think like Airbnbs or that kind of world. And so my client also kind of starts freaking out because if the vacation rental companies are freaking out, they're looking to cut. And the CEO founder of the company that I worked with and am still working with, I commend him a lot because there was like an initial panic, but then there was a very quick resolve to mitigate churn as much as possible. And they worked super hard to do that. And they did a great job. But what was interesting was as we start working together, the narrative was at first, man, we're growing so much, let's keep growing, to how do we survive and also plant seeds for future growth? So my work really, it was the same process. We go through the same process for pretty much every single large strategic engagement. But I would say research and jobs to be done is at the core of pretty much anything and everything that we do, even when we do paid acquisition, for example. But when we started, my number one strategic question to answer was, how has the current market implication changed the expectations of potential customers, both today and then also future? So we go through the research process, talking to customers, understanding their absolute panic and also grief, but also understanding their hopes, their dreams, their wishes, and then also really understanding why did they choose this particular product? How did they go about the process of choosing this product? And then also what really drove them to this out of all of the, and by the way, I forgot to mention the vacation rental software space. There's dozens of platforms. There's dozens. It's just like project management. There's literally dozens of tools out there, and they all look and kind of feel the same, but they all have very different pricing models, and they also have very different, really positioning. And there's many different areas that a platform can go in and really, exceed at. And so my job was kind of figuring out, okay, why these customers? Why this product? And then why this product amongst all the other products? And what we came away with was first we heard a lot of really awesome feedback. Even just going through this process, you just learn so much. And you also, especially when it's a third party doing the research, they told us things that they've never told the client, which is also great because, then the client really gets okay, I'm getting honest feedback here. But we learned that people would often choose my client's product third or fourth. So they would try 3 to 4 other products. And then they would choose my client sometimes third, fourth, basically dead last, if I'm being honest. And sometimes they would even sign to the first or second product that they tried, realize it was crap, try another one, realize it was crap, and then get to my client's product and be like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever used. It's the best in the market. It's amazing. But it was just wild because we learned that this platform was at the bottom of people's lists. And we were like, why? We also learned that we heard this verbatim in interviews, and we learned that people were choosing other competitors because their quote marketing was prettier. And it kind of blew our minds, but also didn't blow my
Interesting.
mind because as a marketer, I'm like,
Right.
there are just some certain industries where brand really does matter.
Mm.
I think a lot of SaaS companies, I have my own personal feelings about brand and investing in brand, and that I really don't until like you're way more at scale. I feel like
Right.
scaled companies, yeah, do brand. But there are some industries where brand like really, really matters. And it seemed like more and more this was an industry or a market where brand kind of mattered. And but we literally heard verbatim, like, I didn't choose you guys because you weren't as pretty as the other ones. And so it was like it was awesome. And at the same exact time, like a big slap in the face. So, and we learned like a bunch of other things too. Like the way that customers viewed the market had fundamentally changed, and also what they needed from the product also had changed. And there was a gap because my client was going to market as this particular platform. Like, it's so easy to use and there's all these features. If you've ever heard April Dunford talk, she talks about the wind tunnel of features. And like, when I tell you that's exactly what my client was doing, it's like to the T. And we talked about like, oh, it's so easy. And like, it's easy to switch to, to us. And after conducting the interviews, it was just so clear that the overarching trend, even analyzing this like on a data-driven level, it was just so clear that we needed to focus on entirely different value propositions. People cared about reliability. They cared about not just features, but features that enabled productivity. They didn't care that it was easy to switch. They wanted to know that this was going to be the platform for them and that they wouldn't have to switch. And that was really more like to the client as opposed to away from the client. But they like people didn't really generally care about, oh yeah, it's easy for me to jump ship. It was much more like, I need to know that this is going to be the thing and I don't have to look again. And like, I don't really care if it's easy to get into the product. But yeah, it was just so eye-opening. And so we overhauled the website. We updated the look and feel. We also took a deep, like hard look at onboarding activation. And I'm going to be honest, we are still looking at activation and onboarding. It's an ongoing experiment. It never ends. I mean, I'm not sure actually if you feel that way too, Emily, but
I agree.
it never just stays the same and like you forget about it and you walk away. We are still adjusting it and changing it and experimenting. And we adjusted the positioning and the messaging entirely. And then there were some other activities too. So of course, like the team really focused on stabilizing the product, making sure that when everything came back, like travel and all the things, they would be ready. And there were some other like feature improvements, feature additions. So I'm not going to say like it was all of our work, but through this very big effort, I mean, we saw trials triple. We saw a 20% lift in activation rate overall. And I think my favorite stat in the first round was a 4x lift in growth. And, obviously like there was a lot that went into that. So then the panorama happens, right? And we're in the middle of it. And I think at this rate, countries are opening back up, travel is coming back. We do another round. So it's been about a year at this point. I've been working with this company for 2 years now. So it's been about a year and we do another round and we find that it's changed again. But it's changed in a slightly different way. It's changed in a way where people are still looking for generally the same value props. But there's we see this with jobs to be done a lot, where customers will come to a company with a specific job in mind. But once they have that job fulfilled, they evolve. And usually there's 1, 2, sometimes even 3 other jobs that they're hoping to accomplish. And if a customer comes to a product with a job, but they actually have 5 other jobs that you just didn't hear about or know about, what happens sometimes is they have one job satisfied by a product, and then they buy another product hoping to satisfy some other jobs. And then they end up with 3 or 4 products. And then they're like, wait, can I just get one that does it all? And that's what we were hearing. So we were hearing people coming to my client's product with this goal of having several, they have several jobs actually. And also existing customers were evolving into new jobs. And so then really the growth work became all around what are the new jobs that we want to make sure that we satisfy? And then how do we internalize that at a company level, which this is not a very large team, but it was definitely a scenario where after analyzing the research, it was just really clear, oh my gosh, we actually have, there's other jobs that we have to think about. And so now the growth story for this particular company is really, we're kind of expanding out into how do we make sure that our main job is as streamlined as it possibly can be, which our job statements have changed over time. Job statements meaning like this is the story that kind of people have whenever they come to the product. They have evolved over time and they haven't stayed the same. And we're also finding like new job stories and like new job statements. So then over the next year, a lot of that work had moved into expanding into new channels, testing different things, continuing to tinker with onboarding and activation, because it is like, it just really does, like, you can't just like set it and forget it, especially if you're attracting more types of customers. And then internal operations, actually, which is a growth lever I think a lot of companies forget about. But internal ops is like, it's another secret lever to pull, believe it or not. And that resulted in the next 6x. So now we're at 10x, which is really cool. So it took 2 years to do 10x, which I know, like, you know, a lot of teams rave about, like 10x in 1 year. But I think for this,
Right.
I guess they are technically lightly funded. I say lightly funded. I think they're like indie funded, if I'm not mistaken, but it was only recently. But they have figured out how to make it work with their existing resources. And any bootstrap team that gets more than 2x growth, that's like a huge win. I don't know if people realize that or not, but more than 2x for a bootstrap team, wow, like incredible, truly. But I would say any growth is still amazing. But more than 2x, that's impressive.
And 10x is incredible and remarkable.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. Wow, that's a great story of how the whole process you talked about earlier you applied it to this particular company, this client, and really saw growth even through a once in a lifetime experience the pandemic.
Hopefully,
like last
crossing
time
our
it happened.
fingers.
Right? Yes, crossing our fingers, knocking on wood. That is, won't this is once in a lifetime, in our lifetime, or any lifetime. I don't want to think about the future at all with that, but it's glad to see growth even through that, especially for vacation rental, which saw dramatic impact with that.
Yeah.
So I want to shift gears now and talk a bit about your career. Part of this is like hearing and learning from really like world-class marketers, and you've been in marketing for 10 years and more. Can you share a power-up, something that's helped you in your career evolve and grow as a marketer and become this CEO of Demand Maven and like board member of Moz and a highly sought after a keynote speaker? What was something that's helped you through this career progression of yours so far?
The thing that comes to mind has to be avoiding as much as you possibly can the shiny object. So we call it bright shiny object syndrome, BSO. There's other phrases for it, but when it comes to BSOs, I am totally guilty. I'm just going to come out right out and say, like, I'm super guilty of a BSO. What I think has helped me the most in my career has been acknowledging the BSO. It's kind of like acknowledging a craving, but then just like letting it fade. Like you're really craving something that is absolutely terrible for you, but and is like going to cause distractions, but like you just let it pass. Like you acknowledge it and you honor it, and you're like, thank you, craving, for reminding me that I'm alive. And then you just let it go. And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of BSOs. There are some BSOs that I think are certainly, titillating and exciting, but what I've learned is that it's so rare. We're talking like maybe 1 out of 50 times a bright, shiny object is actually worth your time and your effort. And what I mean by that is there's always going to be new channels. There's always going to be new tactics. There's always going to be new cool things that come along that you can't possibly miss. I think, I'm a huge believer in jobs to be done, and I will always spread the gospel, but even jobs to be done might be a little bit, I don't think it's necessarily a BSO though. That's just me being biased. But there are tons of them. And what I have learned in my career is that it's so rare that they ever actually pay off. And also when a bright, shiny object comes to your table, so maybe a sales leader has like this wild, crazy idea that you can't possibly miss. Or more often than not, the CEO comes to your table and is like, we need to run this campaign right now because I've dreamt about it and I wrote it like on a piece of toilet paper last night and I woke up this morning and I had to give it to you to like execute the next day. That's a bright, shiny object. And what I have learned is how to manage them as politely as possible, which is, if the answer is yes, it's not right now. And if it's not right now, it's because we have a very data-driven way to show that this isn't going to be worth our effort of switching all of our gears over to your BSO. And managing your own BSOs in addition to other people's BSOs is super exhausting work. But honestly, that is like if you're a marketing manager or a marketing coordinator and you're dreaming of becoming a VP of marketing or a CMO, that is like the level that you're going to have to get to. I actually have someone on my team who her dream is to be a CMO, and I love that dream. One of her greatest opportunities for growth is to learn how to say no to BSOs, specifically from clients. And she wants to say yes to every BSO. And the truth is that there's no energy. There's not enough energy in the world to do all of them, right? And if you're going to switch gears entirely, there needs to be a pretty factual, or at least as confident of a correlation you can make to it being worth it. Because if it's going to feel very frustrating to constantly jump to every new BSO and make no progress. So it's the same thing with cravings, and also the same thing with endless to-do lists. Oh yeah, I can fit that extra thing in, and then you get 2 things done out of the list of 20. And then you're like, oh no, I'm a failure because I only got 2 things done. But in reality, most of us can only handle 2 to 3 things a day anyway. So, it's the same vibe. But that, even when I was like early in my career, I got promoted because I learned how to say no. Seriously, because I kept my chief of sales, I guess, / co-founder in check. And that was literally my job. That, and to make sure the marketing projects were protected. And
Right.
if I could do that, and don't get me wrong, I love my boss, but he was chaos. And so I had to, if I could just manage his chaos in as loving and as fair of a way as I possibly could, but also
Right.
firmly, we were going to make progress. And that was ultimately how I ended up getting promoted and into the roles that I'm in today.
That's so good. BSO. I'm not sure if you tweeted about this or you have a blog post, but that is one of the terms that is instantly coinable, and it's something that you can own. And sure, I'm gonna start using that BSO, and it's coined by Asia, and you've heard it here first.
That's right.
I love it. And the other thing about pushing back on BSOs is so good. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna be saying it all day today. BSO. Hey Joanna, BSO. Is that it helps people respect you because when they understand, they hire you in marketing because marketing hopefully better than the sales leader. The sales is great at sales, and you pushing back helps them see that you're your stuff, and that you have a strategy in place, and that their VSO will derail your plans.
And there's ways to be gentle, of course. But yes, totally. Like, that's what you're really saying. But you're going to add it to the stack, and every quarter you're going to analyze the stack and see, which of these ideas can we add to the plate. And a lot of them aren't ever going to get added. But yeah, that's how I'd approach that.
One final question before we get into the wrap up is around an advice you would give to your younger self, a younger version of Asia starting out in marketing. What would be your advice to your younger self if you can travel back in time and send a few pieces of advice?
I think the thing I would share to my younger self is, and I actually think I'm going to change my answer from when we talked last, but I would have to say that I would just tell her that her self-worth is not tied to the results that she does or does not achieve. And therefore, because her self-worth is not attached to that, it is not defined by that, it also means that's true for pretty much everything in life. That this is so cliche, but I actually do kind of believe in it. We are not human doings, we are human beings. And I think especially in startup and SaaS world, it's so easy to get caught up in how much you're able to execute and also therefore how much you're able to achieve. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in those achievements as being definitions of yourself. But what I've been learning from therapy is attaching your self-worth to your achievements is totally a coping mechanism for something much deeper. In addition to can be potentially harmful, because what happens when you stop achieving? Your life falls apart and is a mess and you feel lower than low. And I've definitely been in scenarios where that has completely impacted. I've certainly been in that scenario. And I guess like the super quick story I can give is my very first startup role. I was working at a company that I had just joined, and I think it was like my first day, or maybe it was my second day. I learned that we needed to generate $600,000 in revenue.
Wow.
That was the stretch goal. The normal goal, the main goal was $300K. And I found out that we had 2 months to do it. So I joined in December and we needed to generate $600K by February, end of February. We needed to do this with zero budget, a team of 2, and a whole bunch of others, like a whole bunch of other contingencies. Like, for example, I learned like in September, like way before I actually joined, there was a contract that was signed that said that if we didn't make this amount of revenue for like a conference that they were running, that we would have to pay out the remainder. And so if we didn't make $300K in like ticket sales, we would have to pay out the remainder of whatever that was to this other company that we were partnering with at the time, whatever. But I learned that like this revenue goal basically came out of some agreement or contract that they had signed before. And so I also learned there was no strategy for doing this. They had never done it before. And there was literally no foundation for this goal to be realistic. And me being young and naive, I thought, oh, this is normal, right? Like this is how startups work, you know? But the more that I uncovered things, the more that I learned that there really was no plan. There was no strategy. The plan was to, it was just basically to pray and to hope and pray that like this would come to fruition. And I remember the more that I raised concern, the more I was told, it's just because you don't believe enough. It's just because you don't, it's like, you're the problem. Like, you're just not doing enough. You're not working hard enough. You don't believe, and that's why this isn't going to happen. And like, but if you believed more, Asia, we could reach this goal. And we would get text messages like in the middle of the night. It's a super small team, so there's like only another one person. But I remember getting like text messages about how like we really needed to hit this goal because if we didn't, like bad things would happen. And needless to say, like I think we made $86K. We did not meet the goal like at all. And in 2 months, $86K, I was like, I'm actually not too mad about that. But it was such a whirlwind of, it truly was unmanaged chaos, but it was like damaging chaos. It was the problem. It wasn't like the kind of chaos that feels exciting and or like encourages you to stretch or to grow. It was the kind of chaos that was like damaging. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought that this was normal. So I went into my next role with a lot of fear, anxiety. It was FUD for, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I thought it was normal. And I thought this was just how it was. And I attached myself to the end result of, man, I didn't make $600K, but I made 87. And I felt like a total failure. I'm going to be super honest. But what I've learned is you really can't attach yourself to those kinds of things in the end, because if you don't have the full context, and knowing what I know now, hindsight's 2020. Actually, that's not true. I don't believe in that anymore. But at least in that moment, hindsight was 2020. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so not your fault. That wasn't your fault at all. And also, even if it were, the circumstances upon which you needed to accomplish that were just so unrealistic. It just wasn't even, there's no way it could have happened. And it took me a long time and a lot of therapy, but I no longer take responsibility for that. And but that's why I tell that story, because that's definitely one of my first experiences. I'm super thrilled to say it is not the norm. I've worked for other incredible SaaS companies that have completely different cultures and environments and expectations that are far more realistic, and also don't do that to their marketers. So, but yeah, it was a hard lesson learned, but I'm glad I learned it. And it's a story I don't tell often, but I'm happy to share it, with others, because I feel like a lot of us have a similar story of like just complete and total just craziness when it comes to marketing. And also knowing that there's light on the other end of the tunnel, that there are places that do respect the marketer, and also, don't treat people super crazy. And it was a crazy experience. I'm glad it happened though. Like, I wouldn't trade it, if that makes any sense. Like, I grew a lot as a person, and that's part of why I give that advice.
That is such a good piece of advice. I think you're right. Just based on the marketers I've talked to, they have faced not the same experience, but a similar experience where founders would put undue pressure, and even in my experience, scream at the marketing team in front of everybody. And I feel like that needs to be, more marketers need to hear this advice. And really thank you for sharing this. And as we wrap up, one final question. Well, where you have such a honest and transparent and authentic vibe about you, and I thank you for that. If people wanted to like just reach out, where can people find you online? On Twitter, if it's the joke is if it still exists, on LinkedIn, anywhere else. Where do you want to send people to who are tuning into this that can connect with you and connect with the Demand Maven team as well?
That's right. And an upper. All right. So I was going to say, you can find me on Mastodon. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, you technically can. Okay. So Twitter, I still, I have so many feelings, but I won't share them now. You can still find me on Twitter at Asia Arangio, and my DMs are open. If there's any, I'm so happy to answer any questions anyone has, and, or even if it's just, to trade war stories, I'm super down. And then yes, LinkedIn. I would say if you send a LinkedIn connection request, just make sure to add that you listen to this podcast. So that way I know, because I literally get hundreds of connection requests every day. And I never know who is who. But yes, you can also totally find me on LinkedIn. And there's also the website, the blog. We've kind of been quiet over the last couple of years in terms of content. I do a lot of speaking. I appear on podcasts. But when it comes to Demand Maven's own content, we've been a little quiet. We do have a podcast. We also have a blog. Those are going to come back. 2023 is what we're planning for. But in the meantime, though, you can definitely find me on socials. And yes, you can technically find me on Mastodon.
I hope you got as much from my conversation with Asia as I did. It's always fun geeking out about the Jobs to Done framework with anyone. I can do it for days. Now follow Asia on LinkedIn and Twitter, and check out Demand Maven at demandmaven.io. You can find those links in the show notes and description. Thank you to Asia for being on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd love the Marketing Power-Ups newsletter. I share the actionable takeaways and break down the frameworks of world-class marketers. You can go to marketingpowerups.com to subscribe, and you'll instantly unlock the 3 best frameworks that top marketers use to hit their KPIs consistently and wow their colleagues. I want to say thank you to you for listening, and please like and follow Marketing Power-Ups on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're feeling extra generous, kindly leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and leave a comment on YouTube. It goes a long way in others finding out about Marketing Power-Ups. Thanks to Mary Sullivan for creating the artwork and design, and thank you to Faisal Kaigo for editing the intro video. And of course, thank you for listening. That's all for now. Have a powered up day.
Marketing Power-Ups. Until the next episode,